Hello everybody, we have something a little bit different today. This is going to be a fan-made story by someone that I hold near and dear to my heart, and I know he's going to be very excited once this video finally uploads. This is going to be the controversial story of FNAF 3 Ransom. He wrote it himself, and he knows who it is, and yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. Around the time FNAF 4's first teaser came out, something began to stir on the internet. On Game Jolt in the App Store, a game called Real Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was making the rounds. The description said this was the original FNAF 3 as Scott had intended before changing the game drastically. I will go in depth to these secrets and in-game mechanics in a moment, but I want to talk about what happened. When people realized this was ransomware and what was going on, people were pissed. Scott even had to make a post explaining he had nothing to do with this app. The drama caused Scott to delay FNAF 4 for health reasons. Luckily, with support from the fans, he would recover. There are very few remaining images of this game on the internet. The image used is a recreation of the game's icon from one of the survivors of the game. Now, disturbing content warning ahead, the following is the gameplay the app had. The title screen, according to descriptions, was that the game was called Salvage, with the title Five Nights at Freddy's 3 in red. Salvage's head was overlooking a theme park on the title screen. Starting the game, the player would have found themselves in an office inside that was an office building in what was called Freddyland. According to the description, the game had an oddly realistic look to it. Most things didn't seem to be made in the game engine. It was also common for the game to become, quote, desaturated and static-like how FNAF ransomware videos usually look. No one can remember the phone's calls one-to-one, but the basic idea for each night will be explained. Real quick though, the office had a door in front of you that was closed via a lever. The player could rotate behind them to a large window showing the outside of the theme park. For Night 1's call, it gave an introduction to Freddyland, and explained how to deal with the Salvage character. The player would have to look at Salvage on the camera, which would slow him down, but Salvage would still reach the office eventually. If he reached the door to the office, he would have to close the door, which was actually slow due to the lever's physics. If Salvage was at the window, the player would have to play an alarm to scare him away. The alarm had terrible audio balancing. It was either too quiet, too loud, or made no sound at all. When the player entered Night 2, two new threats were added. The first one was described by Phone Guy as a shadow apparition of a child, but most referred to it as Shadow Balloon Boy. Shadow Balloon Boy would appear in the office of the player. When he did, players described the following: ear-piercing sound of a child screaming and crying. The player would have to flip the camera up to get him to go away. The other character introduced in Night 2 is referred to by Phone Guy as a strange model of Chica. Those who played the game simply called it Chica. This Chica never actually appeared on the cameras and often appeared out of nowhere in the player's office by passing the door or window. The player would have to stare at Chica to make her leave. Strangely, she had a janky leaving animation instead of just vanishing. On Night 3, two more characters were introduced. The first is what Phone Guy referred to as an old prototype of Foxy. Players described this version of Foxy appearing lanky and looking like it had been hand-drawn. This Foxy worked like Salvage in the sense if he stared at him on the cameras, he would slow. When it came to the door, Foxy would outrun the closing door every time. Instead, he would use the newly obtained strobe light to ward Foxy off when he would run to the doorway. The other Night 3 character was described as a creepy version of the Puppet. It was described as frighteningly fast, racing across the building. You would have to use an audio lure to lure it as far away as possible from your office. Night 4 introduced two more characters. The first was described by Phone Guy as a strange mascot suit. This had been referred to as Golden Bear due to names in the files. Golden Bear would randomly appear in the player's office. The player would just have to flip the camera up or look away at the window. If they didn't, they would be jump scared, but not killed. Golden Bear would make the player unable to use the camera for several moments, which players described as 90% chance of death due to the other characters being so active. The second character, Phone Guy, was merely a hallucination, an uncanny-looking version of Freddy. This version of Freddy, referred to as Stress Freddy via people who played the game, would appear in all cameras and in the office or window at any point. If the player stared at this Freddy for too long, a stress meter would rapidly go up. If it filled, the player would be killed. Night 5 introduced the game's last character. Oddly, Phone Guy repeated the phrase of, "She doesn't exist." This character has been referred to as Her by those who play the game. She resembles a realistic version of the artwork, I Cannot Be a Bride Anymore. Her had music that caused, quote, ungodly dread when being heard. She would switch up tactics, going to Salvage's path, Foxy's path, and Stress Freddy. Keep in mind she was active alongside everyone else. There was a Night 6, but introduced no new characters, speeding up the characters to a ridiculous degree. But the Phone Guy was now a completely different voice. A voice-modified male voice explaining that they knew where the player lived, and they were no longer safe, and they would die. Upon completing the 6th night, the game would crash, a final message being this: see you soon. Now, while this game has strange things, and though it was confirmed to be ransomware, what was so dark about it? Well, there's two things. The first was some players looked into the files and found something horrible. Audio of the game's developer confessing the truth behind this game. Every character, minus the Salvage, was a representation of someone he had killed. The salvage was there purely to mock the represented victims by being the most normal character. But these audios only unlocked after night 6, and the developer remarked how he'd enjoy killing the player. Then there's the second dark thing. This ransomware didn't steal money, it took the address of the player, and it showed it to the developer, where he would go and kill the player and any witness in the house. When these two things were revealed, people were enraged and wanted the man to pay. Luckily, he did, as he was arrested 9 months after the game was released. And when confessing to how many he killed, including the original 7 representing the game, he said he lost count after 27. Real Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was taken off the App Store and game jailed upon the developer's arrest. Some say the files for the game are still out there, and this application is now considered lost media, but most agree to not search for it and let this game rot in hell. Then there was an update. A fan has recently made a safe fan game recreation of Real Five Nights at Freddy's 3 called Welcome to Freddyland. It's a safe fan game to play with a fake ransomware aesthetic. It comes close to recreating an experience fans described it playing like, having an optional game mode or authentic mode. Game mode plays the game without the extremely cursed moments of the original game, such as no ear bleeding Screech, and a phone guy voiced by the creator of FNAF himself, Lucas, to play a normal version of Phone Guy. Authentic mode play the game how it was described by the survivors in a safe, non-virus way, complete with cursed sounds and moments. The game has 2 new features not part of the original ransomware. An extra menu like most FNAF games with a behind-the-scenes how it was done, and a good ending unlocked by playing secret minigames to sabotage the park to burn it down, ending with the image of Salvage burning alive as he screams in pain, and the heads of his victims empty with the FNAF 3 good ending theme. The game files reveal the good ending was made to bring justice to victims who died at the killer's hands. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the controversial story of FNAF 3 Ransom. I know that whoever is out there, and he knows who he is, saying that he wants me to upload this, he's going to be really happy when this posts, and I hope that everyone else also enjoys. I know it's a little different me uploading a fan story, but I owed it to him and I told him I would, so thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.